Hey, what's going on everybody? It's etaprime back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at a true mini gaming PC. Now when I say true, we've got a dedicated GPU in this, and it's known as the Minisforum HX90G. Now this is one I've been waiting on for a while. We've got an all AMD platform, so we've got a Ryzen CPU and a Radeon GPU. And by the way, the Radeon GPU is a 6000 series based on RDNA 2 with 8GB of GDDR6 VRAM. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at and testing out the HX90G. We'll do an unboxing, we'll go over the specs, run some benchmarks, test out some PC games and emulation. But I will have a couple more videos coming up. Next one that will be uploaded with this PC here is going to be Linux running on this machine since we've got an all AMD platform. Really easy to get it up and running, and I think we can see some really great performance, especially out of something like SteamOS 3. Alright, so let's go ahead and get this thing out of the box. Like I mentioned, we've got a Ryzen CPU. It is based on Zen 3, and it's a mobile CPU, but we've got 8 cores and 16 threads. And when it comes to that discrete GPU, it's based on RDNA 2. We'll take a look at all of the specs in just a second, but yeah, I mean, I really do love the way this thing looks. It's definitely a bit larger than some of the other mini PCs that we take a look at on the channel, but this is putting out a lot more power than most of the other mini PCs that we've tested. I mean, like I mentioned, we've got that discrete GPU, so yeah, this is definitely a real mini gaming PC. Minisforum is going to be offering this in a few different configurations. You can pick it up bare bones with no RAM or storage. You can go all the way up to 64GB of RAM and a 512GB M.2 SSD. Not sure why they don't have a larger one listed. But either way, it's still upgradable, easy to get into. If you wanted to, this PC will sit horizontally on the table, but they also include this carbon fiber stand, a 6-foot HDMI cable, and a 260-watt power supply. Personally, I would definitely put this on the stand. I think that kind of sets it off. It looks really good like that. Upgrading the storage and RAM is really simple. We've got 4 screws on the bottom, and this one came pre-configured with 16GB of RAM and a 512GB M.2 SSD. But as you can see, we've got another M.2 slot in here. This also comes with a pre-installed Wi-Fi 6/Bluetooth 5.2 card. And when it comes to the cooling system, they definitely needed to beef this up from other mini PCs that they offer because we've got a higher-end mobile CPU and a discrete GPU that we need to cool at the same time. So they went with a dual-fan heatsink setup, and the cooler here has 7 copper heat pipes. They've also added liquid metal to boost cooling. Now, I'm not exactly sure if this is going to be used on the CPU and the GPU, but I will have a full teardown video coming up. I didn't want to destroy this thing before I got all of my testing out of the way. But if you remember back, Minisforum did release a PC called the HX90, which also used liquid metal. Some of the first units that went out the door did have an issue with a little bit of liquid metal on the motherboard, which could cause an issue down the road. I'm sure they've learned from their mistakes, but I'd love to do a full teardown video before this officially launches. So if you're interested in seeing something like that, make sure you hit that subscribe button and think about turning notifications on so you know when I post the next one. But when it comes to the specs of the HX90G, we're looking at a very powerful small form factor gaming PC here. For the CPU, they opted to use the Ryzen 9 5900HX. We've got 8 cores, 16 threads, a base clock of 3.3 GHz, and a turbo up to 4.6. Right out of the box, this is running at 65 watts, and I'd say that's a really good sweet spot here. If it was just integrated graphics here, I'd like to up that a bit because we need to send a little power to the iGPU. But since we have a dedicated Radeon RX 6600M with 8GB of GDDR VRAM, 65 watts on the 5900HX is plenty of power. When it comes to RAM, this will support up to 64GB of DDR4 running at 3200 MHz. The unit we're going to be taking a look at has 16. It's got Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2, and this one's running Windows 11 Pro, but we also have the option to basically install any Linux variant that we want. Alright, so I'm ready to jump right into it. We've got Windows 11 Pro here. I'm fully up to date. I've got some emulators we're going to be testing out, some PC games. I'm also going to run some benchmarks here. I've been messing around with this for 2 days now, and I've had a great time with it. If you wanted to use this as an everyday PC, you're not going to have any issues whatsoever. This could be an awesome little 4K video editing machine also. Super fast Wi-Fi with that Wi-Fi 6. Personally, I prefer using Ethernet. We've got that 2.5 gigabit port right on the back here. And, you know, for having so much power, this thing does stay pretty cool. But first and foremost, this is definitely marketed as a gaming machine. So let's test out some games. Okay, so first up, one of my favorites, Forza Horizon 5, and the way I've got it set up right now is 1440p high, and with it set up like this, we can get an average of around 117 FPS. 1440p Ultra with no resolution scale nets us an average of around 84, but I do think that we can take this up to 4K, so I'm going to head over here to the settings. We're going to change it from 1440 to 4K. As you can see, no resolution scale, and I'll show you that we are at high settings here. And I'm pretty sure this is going to run really well. With some resolution scale, we could do 4K Ultra, but that's the reason I kept it at high, because I knew I didn't want to use any kind of resolution scale. I was really hoping we could get over 60 at 4K with this, and it still looks great at high settings. But this is pretty awesome. Small form factor PC like this, running Forza Horizon 5 at 4K high is pretty impressive. The next thing I want to take a look at are some benchmarks I ran on this unit, and then we'll jump right back into some PC gaming. Geekbench 5 scores were looking really good with this unit, and remember, we're at a 65 watt TDP on the CPU, and I haven't overclocked the GPU whatsoever, so all of these benchmarks are at the stock configuration. Next up, we've got Cinebench R23. We got a total multi-core score of 13,924, and this really does stress out the CPU. R23 continuously runs as many times as it can in a 10-minute period, and by the end of this, the CPU only hit 87 degrees Celsius, which is the highest temperature I saw out of any of my testing with this unit. Moving over to some GPU benchmarks with 3D Mark. Firestrike came in with a 20,655, and I also ran TimeSpy. We got a really impressive 8,163. I mean, yeah, this thing is definitely a real gaming machine in a super small form factor, so let's go ahead and test out some more games. Spiderman Remastered, 1440p, very high, and I did turn FSR to quality. Personally, I don't notice much of a difference or, degradation in the image quality turning FSR on, and it definitely helped out with that frame rate. But keep in mind, you could run this at 1440p high with no FSR on. But yeah, so far what I've tested on this machine has worked out really well. It's kind of turning out to be a great little 1440p high ultra gaming PC. Cyberpunk 2077 did require FSR set to quality even at high settings, but this is a really hard game to run. And with it set up like this, we got an average of 74 FPS, which is really good for a game like this. And with all of the stuff that I'm testing here at 1440p, dropping it down to 1080 Ultra, it's going to run it just fine. I just wanted to see how high we could take the resolution up with these games. And it seems, with most of the stuff, 1440 is going to be the max. I've got Elden Ring here running at 1440p high, getting a really steady 60 FPS, and initially I went into this at maximum settings, but every once in a while I would see that frame rate dip into the mid-50s. But all that cleared up real nicely once I took it down from ultra to high settings. God of War, 1440p, high, no FSR. If you want to run this game at ultra on this machine, you will have to turn FSR to quality. I've just been doing a little bit of experimenting with different FSR settings in different games. But yeah, I mean, all of this stuff has been running really well at 1440p. And with this, by the end, I came out with an average of 77 FPS. And the final PC game I wanted to test here before we move over to some emulation was Halo Infinite. 1440p with a high medium mix, no resolution scale, we can get an average of around 75 FPS. So overall, the HX90G is definitely putting out some really good performance when it comes to PC gaming. And I kind of got an idea of what to expect out of emulation. Basically everything at 4K with this machine here. Starting off light with PS2 using PC-SX2, 4K DirectX 11 backend, we've got Soul Calibur 3, which is a harder game to emulate. And if you take a look at Afterburner, up in the top left-hand corner, we're at a super steady 60 FPS. So when it comes to PS2, as long as the game's compatible with the PC-SX2 emulator, it's going to run it just fine, even at a 4K resolution. The next one I wanted to test for this video was some Xbox 360 emulation using Xenia. We've got Forza 2, and I do have VSync turned off, so you'll see we're getting real close to 200 FPS, and that's definitely more than enough. Turning VSync back on will just lock everything at 60, And in turn, this little PC won't have to pull as much power, which will also save you on GPU and CPU temps. We always like to test out CEMU, the Wii U emulator. Here it is at 4K, Vulkan back in, async shaders are turned on, and we're running Bayonetta 2. I haven't seen this dip under 60, and going into all of these emulators, I really didn't expect any less. We've got plenty of power there on the CPU and GPU to run most of this stuff at 4K over 60. And the final one here is very taxing on that CPU. We've got PS3 using RPCS3. We're at 4K using the Vulkan backend. And these are the highest temperatures that I saw out of the CPU while doing any kind of gaming or emulation. And it really comes down to this emulator here loving to use lots of cores and threads at the same time. There's a couple more things I always like to take a look at with these small form factor PCs, and the first one being CPU temps, especially given that we have such a powerful CPU in this unit. And overall, the average CPU temps weren't bad at all. At idle, we averaged 38 degrees Celsius. Average gaming at 1440p is around 74, and the maximum temperature I saw this CPU hit was 87 degrees Celsius, and that was while I was running Cinebench, which does stress out that CPU pretty bad. So under everyday normal use and 1440p gaming, you're not going to hit thermal throttle with this CPU at all. Next thing I like to take a look at is total system power consumption, and since we're working with a dedicated GPU, this is going to be way higher than some of the other lower powered PCs we look at on the channel. But at idle, this is around 23 watts. 1440p gaming, we averaged 180, and the maximum that I could get this to pull from the wall while maxing out the GPU and the CPU at the same time was 227 watts. Remember, we've got a 260 watt power supply included, so we're good to go there also. First impressions of the HX90G, I personally think it's a great performing mini PC. It's not a 4K Ultra machine, but it does handle everything that I threw at it 1440p high, and if you did go into this and just want to do 1080p Ultra, it's going to handle everything. It's a different story when it comes to emulation, because with that, we can take those up to 4K and some of them even beyond. I mean, as long as you got a good emulator and a game that's compatible with said emulator, it's going to do 4K no problem at all. When it comes to the design, I am a big fan of it. I think it looks good. I love the fact that they included this new stand, and it does have what they're calling carbon fiber armor. So the whole thing isn't constructed of carbon fiber. They're claiming that it's got a carbon fiber reinforced plastic body, and as you can see from the diagram here, we've got that carbon fiber armor in different places on the unit. When it comes to I/O, for most people, we've got plenty of it, but I do wish there was one USB Type-C port around back. I've been using these newer USB Type-C flash drives, and I just don't want them sticking out of the front of this unit. I mean, it does work like it sits right now, but it just would have been nice to have one more on the rear. But yeah, overall, really been enjoying using this thing with Windows 11, and I definitely want to test out Linux on this machine. That'll be my next video with the HX90G, so if you're interested in seeing, let's say, SteamOS 3, otherwise known as Steam Deck OS, running on this unit, then keep an eye on the channel, and it'd be really cool if you could hit that subscribe button and maybe turn notifications on so you know when I post the next one. And if there's any other games, operating systems, or anything at all you want to see running on the HX90G, just let me know in the comments below. If you're interested in learning more, I will leave a few links in the description. It's up for pre-order right now over on Minisforum's website. You can pick up a bare bones or up to 64 gigabytes of RAM and a 512 gigabyte SSD. But that's going to wrap it up for this first look video. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. And like always, thanks for watching.